It's fine.
Great.
Yeah. So guys, we are live now, but we're here
live.
with our we are live. We're live. I apologize. I tried to do something. I accidentally.
No worries at all. Is it Rabbi Beni?
Yeah, Rabbi Beni. Yes, Rabbi Beni.
Great.
Right. Awesome. So we're here with Ollie. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Teach me how to pronounce your last name.
Well, I'm curious to know how you think it should be pronounced.
Anisfeld or Anisfeld.
Anisfeld.
Okay. So I got it right.
It's often mistaken, so that's pretty good. Pretty good going.
Right. So that's good. Now, would you like this view? Is this better or is this better?
This is the current one we're on is better for me.
Okay, yeah. Fine. No problem. So I did a whole setup here, and I'm a little bit off. Okay, there we go. Even better. Okay. All right, so no one can see my flag, but I'm pro America first, guys. All right. Yeah. Nice. So here we're here with Ollie, guys. We watch her throughout our channels and X and so on and so forth. And also YouTube and Facebook. We're trying to get in the game of the live game. The live game, I think, is the biggest difficult game to do, right? When you go live, I think it's the hardest one. What do you think?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I find sometimes if you're covering things that are very topical, that people want live, obviously fast-changing information on, then sometimes live can be more effective. But you're right that unless you already have quite an established presence, or unless you just happen to get into the algorithm at that particular moment, it can sometimes better to have packaged videos, I think, that you can kind of market in the way you want.
Right, for sure. I agree with that. That's also a good point. I didn't think about some of the parts you said, that if you are able to catch it in the moment. I mean, we were able to catch it in the moment when there was a Charlie Kirk memorial. So me and my guy who we do comics, we do a comic podcast. We were able to get up to 55,000 live viewers. It's pretty good. Yeah, and that was like a 7-hour run. It was really cool. So Ali, tell me what you do. I mean, I was very intrigued. You're all of a sudden coming on my Instagram, like, who is this gangster? Talking and getting things done with, and to such an extent, Candace Owens mentions you, like in your trailer reel. What is going on in your world? What's going on in your spectrum over there?
Well, it's definitely the first time I've been called a gangster. I like that term. Yeah, why not? I mean, the truth is, I never thought that setting up a Jewish educational channel, I'd be necessarily seen as edgy. But actually, that always is my style, and I. Not in terms of relationships with other people, but intellectually, I like to provoke, I like to challenge, I like to say the things that people don't necessarily want to say. I find that quite exciting and thrilling, and I think we need a bit more thrill and excitement in the work of doing good. Evil has too much of that. We need to get some of that into the work of goodness and morality. And so essentially, my story is I grew up in a traditional Jewish home, but became a lot more connected to my Judaism over time. I didn't go to a Jewish school, but was supplied with Jewish education through bar mitzvah teachers and shul and things like that. And in my teen years, just became more intellectually curious and decided that I was convinced about the truth of this, and that also this is like the key work of my life, to bring Jewish values to my community and maybe into the world beyond that. And I always thought in very global terms. I always knew that I wanted to do something that would be about trying to have an impact on maybe a national level, global level. It's like always thinking kind of macro. So I wasn't sure if that would be politics or Judaism or whatever, and decided that it was going to be Judaism. And I spent a year in Israel in yeshiva, and learned a lot and really got clued up on Jewish philosophy and Jewish law and these kind of things. And obviously, it's an ongoing work, but that was really eye-opening for me. And learned a lot. Also learned a lot about the religious world, the religious observant world, and the complicated world that is. In many ways, beautiful. In many ways, complex. And navigating that, because there are elements that are very much rooted in Jewish values, and you see that in the most incredible ways. And there are also, you have to kind of navigate that some things are actually just sociological constructs, not necessarily rooted in just Torah values. Not that they're against Torah values, but that you don't, one can be able to be a bit more discerning and just have a bit of critical thinking there. So that's been a decade-long journey, especially with dating and all these things. Anyway, when I was in my last few years of high school, I remember tuning into American news media, because I was like, whoa, this is so different to British news, which is just like impartial, quote unquote, even though we know the BBC,
we hope they're impartial, or they claim they're impartial, but
exactly
with the latest BBC scandals, I don't think they're that impartial, right?
Exactly, they purport to be, but they're not. Whereas at least in America, they're not trying to pretend to be, at least in some cases. So I was really drawn to people like Glenn Beck, who had these opinion shows where I know it's like 2011, 2012, and I'd stay up late at night watching him, because I was so gripped by like, whoa, someone's using media to actually educate whilst entertain. So that you're drawing people in and you're using it to and I was like, whoa, we need this from a Jewish perspective. And so after I came back from yeshiva, set up this thing called JTV. And have been doing this for quite a while now. A few years into JTV, I also set up some political channels, and that's how I ended up kind of learning more about like all the battles that you've been describing. I mean, JTV was always aimed at having different elements to it. We would do Jewish wisdom and Judaism, but also tie in current affairs and politics. And I was always interested in those things. But I also set up some other things that were just focused on, let's say, British politics and things like that. And actually, in late 2018, I ended up meeting when they came to London, Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens, and I worked with them on bringing over some of their projects to the UK for a while, and haven't been so involved in that for quite a few years now, but always maintained a connection with Charlie and Candace less so, but I have had some, have been quite friendly with her husband in the past, but we haven't spoken for quite a long time. So that's just quite interesting how it kind of all interplays there. Although that particular reference of Candace Owens to me was just because, nothing to do with any of that, but just because I did an interview with Josh Hammer, and she's been calling out Josh Hammer, who's a bit like, he's quite similar to Ben Shapiro, Jewish conservative podcaster who talks sense. And of course, those are things that Candace Owens abhors for some reason.
Well, listen, I have in my perspective, I have a little squabble with a few influencers, and when it comes to representing Judaism, right? Not to say that they're not doing a great job; they're doing a great job, but we also have to take in consideration the morality of Judaism, right? What is the moral? What do I refer to morality, right? Don't pick fights like Ben Shapiro did a couple of weeks ago. Like, why you have to name drop people's names? Say what you got to say without the name dropping. You get what I'm trying to say? Like, but because that takes away from the aspect of how we are supposed to grow as a unit together. It's very hard to grow as a unit if you're calling out specific names, and I'm talking specifically about Megyn Kelly, right? That I personally believe he should have never said anything about Megyn Kelly. Tucker Carlson's fair game. Candace Owens is fair game. Nick Fuentes is fair game. I think Megyn Kelly is not fair game. And the reason why is because Megyn Kelly did say a good point, and we know in Judaism we have a concept called hakarat hatov, right? You have to recognize the good that was done for you, right? And for sure, she has done a lot of good for Ben Shapiro. I remember when I was watching the Megyn Kelly show in Fox News, I'm like, who's this Jewish guy, Ben Shapiro? Really, a guy with a kippah is coming on a Fox News channel or whatever it is? That's a big thing. She has a good point. Like, listen, I helped him grow his status, that he should be picking on me. Listen, reality is, this is the reality. People are going to have opinions about race. People are going to have opinions about culture. It's always going to be there. And you mentioned about the Jewish Orthodox. I'm sure going to Israel, you realize there's more politics in the Orthodox Jewry than there is in any other political arena. It's a side point, right?
Well, it's interesting, the whole why do you have to name Ben Shapiro? Why does Ben Shapiro have to name Tucker and Megyn Kelly and all that kind of stuff?
Right.
I have a mixed view on that. The first thing I'd say is that I certainly agree that we should always try to spin things positively, especially when we're calling out bad behavior. So, for example, the booing of Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, I don't think that as much as the pain is deeply real and legitimate, and the fact that Rabbi Eli Schlanger, who was murdered, the Chabad rabbi that was murdered, wrote to Albanese months prior urging him to reverse his decision to recognize a Palestinian state, saying that would fuel further anti-Semitism. We had, as a Jewish community, every right to feel, deeply, deeply upset with Albanese. But at the same time, the way to speak to him, especially at a public ceremony like that, is invite him to correct his mistakes. Always speak in the positive. Say, now you've got the platform, you've got the microphone, do something good, do something right here, right? So I accept all of that. So perhaps Ben Shapiro could stand up and say, invite them, maybe not Candace, I don't know how you do it with her, but some of the people, right. But others in the movement, invite them to do the good rather than the evil. But so maybe stylistically you can have a whole discussion here. However, the idea of actually naming names, I'm not so sure that one has to avoid doing that. I understand there's a special case of Megyn Kelly. We can talk about her in a second. But I'm not sure that I agree that one shouldn't name, because ultimately, when you put your name out there and you speak, you are inviting a public conversation where you are named as someone that said certain things and does that, and you have to own that to a certain extent. If things are happening behind closed doors or privately, if it's your friends who are public figures but they've said things behind closed doors, that doesn't matter for something in private. But if there is a problem of a specific person or a few specific people that keep doing things, and they are doing things that are influencing lots and lots of people in a way that can deeply negatively impact their own morality and society at large, I think sometimes, because what they are doing is so tied to them as personalities, I think sometimes in order to provide that moral clarity, they need to be named as the ones doing this. Now, how you talk about what they've done, how you talk about fixing it, I think you can be more productive and positive. But I think for the sake of giving people moral clarity and saying, by the way, you should know that Ben Shapiro has withheld from naming names for a very, very, very long time. This happened after things got to a breaking point. I think one of the times was when Tucker Carlson was invited on after many, many incidents of him saying all kinds of appalling things, including at Charlie Kirk's own memorial. But he invites Nick Fuentes on, and Charlie Kirk's one of his avowed enemies and claims to be a close friend of Charlie, wanting to honor his legacy, and invites him on, number one, something that Charlie would have hated, and number two, even if you want to say, well, come on, free speech at all costs, fine, but he doesn't challenge him at all. He gives him a fawning, pandering interview. And Ben Shapiro said, at this point, this is becoming dangerous. Now, he could just talk in generalities. If we invite neo-Nazis on, that's a big problem because X, Y, and Z. But sometimes, actually, especially because you'll gain more awareness this way and gain a bigger voice, sometimes he has to play a little bit of a game that they play, which is naming names, not because he's trying to start catfights. That is obviously not Ben Shapiro's style. It's because he wants to give moral clarity. Now, in the case of Megyn Kelly, I actually do find that she has crossed the line, and I don't disagree with the importance of hakarat, hatov, and gratitude. We all know that's an important point, but that doesn't mean someone has a free ticket, a blank check to say whatever they want. Obviously, that can't be a principle, because otherwise, they can run riot with, and do terrible things.
But then you fall into a problem. There's no real rule book and what you can say, what you cannot say, what's good and what's not good. Yeah. And in regards to neo-Nazis, we're not platforming every neo-Nazi. I mean, I personally feel that a Nick Fuentes is something that we've created in the social media space. Not me, I wasn't involved in that time frame, right? But it's a creation in the social media space where we're not addressing issues that a Nick Fuentes, I watch Nick Fuentes, I watch everybody. I watch a little bit of Candace, a little bit of everybody, and just to see what they say. And the reality is, you gotta understand, I personally think, okay, Nick Fuentes, is he racist? I'm sure he is. He said something very interesting in Piers Morgan. He says everybody's a little bit racist. Honestly, he's 100% right. Everybody is a little bit racist. Everybody wants their own culture to grow. Everyone wants their own community to grow, their own background, their own origins to grow, right? There's nothing wrong with that. We do that let's be frank, we do that in Judaism. What are all these podcasts about Judaism about? About presenting our faith, our position, correct or wrong? I mean, would you agree with that or not?
I'd agree that we are circles of interest and care are existing concentric circles. I don't know whether I'd equate that with racism. Maybe racism is that in the negative sense. It's one thing to say I'm prioritizing.
The word racism has become a negative term, right? But there's nothing really negative about it, right?
I think it depends what it means. So if racism means I'm just prioritizing my own family, then my own community, my own nation, and then work out that way, it depends what I mean. If that's racist, well then yeah, we're all racist. if racism means prejudicing, persecuting, holding to a double standard, willing for a destruction or a persecution of, or a manipulating of certain groups, which is what I think many people assume it to be. Maybe not. Maybe it's completely been twisted today. Then that, of course, is something.
I think it's only in America, because if you go, I went to Japan, I went to China. If you go to Japan or China, are they racist? They're not necessarily racist. Right. I mean, they're all Japanese, are all one unit, one looking, one culture, right? So because you look different than them and they might chastise you because you're not part of their culture, is that really considered racism? I mean, racism is a big thing. The only reason why I'm even talking about this is because Megyn Kelly should have a right, especially if she helped Ben Shapiro grow, right? It's like you have rabbis and students, right? All of a sudden, the rabbi learns with the student, and the student learns with the rabbi, and all of a sudden, the student flips on the rabbi in a sense, right? Whatever it will be, right? It happens that happens many times in the world of scholarly work, whether it's a teacher, student, mentor, student, whatever it is. It's sometimes just don't have a life, they have a lifespan, and ultimately, what I think is I love Ben Shapiro. He has a platform, right? He does great work. You have a platform. I personally believe you have a better delivery system than Ben Shapiro. Between me and you, I mean, I compare the two. I do my own research. I think your delivery is much better than Ben's. It's just he's more popular, but then you're going to be much popular, right? And then what's going to happen is are we here going to advocate, or are we going to here be in an attack mode? So that's why I'm really looking at, like, do we need to be attackative, or do we need to buy the perception of people? What is better to buy? I mean, when you attack someone, is he going to do what you want because you attacked him, or when you're going to persuade him and show him what the perception of who we are? Wouldn't that buy people better? He was an AmFest. You have so many people there. Wouldn't you have taken that opportunity to try to get the 20% that don't follow you to start following you? Think about that. Like, it's an opportunity missed in my point of view.
I hear you. You don't want to be negative, and when you are offering criticism, you want it to be constructive and positive. Just on the Megyn Kelly point, before I get back to how would you, what would you be saying to an audience if you had their attention? Just on the Megyn Kelly point, she has, in my view, been now. I always judge people on how damaging they are and whether you need to say something based on the frequency of how often they're doing something and the intensity of how bad it is. And I've seen from her that she has frequently and quite intensely defended Candace, Owens, and Tucker Carlson, and the conspiracy theories, the lies, and the potential hatred that they are engendering among their followers. And she sort of is kind of been laundering that and I've seen it happen a number of times. And on top of that, she'll say, but come on, we need unity, and we shouldn't be criticizing each other. So she's kind of claims, well, I'm just trying to bring everyone together. But then she'll regularly attack people like Mark Levin and Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro and others. And so to me, it seems clear that she is I think she is part of the problem, maybe to a lesser extent, but she's definitely playing that same game. And I think in all cases with Tucker, with Candace, and with Megyn, it seems to me they're acting in bad faith here. They're playing a cynical game for clicks, views, and seeing that's the way the wind is blowing. A bit similar with J.D. Vance in some ways. Now, how do we deal with that as Jews, as conservatives? Well, Ben Shapiro is someone who talks about what's happening in the world and tries to provide conservative and moral, and hopefully they overlap, and Judeo-Christian, or Jewish in his case, values to his audience, commentary that can help them shape the way they think about these issues. And it happens to be that personalities in the conservative sphere have become a big topic of conversation, whether it's Tucker and his big interviews or Candace and her crazy conspiracy theories. And so the people and the topics are becoming the same in a way. And so for Ben to sort of say, well, I'm just not going to talk about that, or avoid all the conspiracy theories they're pushing and the massive damage that it's doing to my own movement that I'm spending so much time investing in to try and build up, I'm not sure it's viable to say, well, I can completely dismiss it or ignore it. I'm also not sure it's viable to say, well, I can talk about it in generalities without talking about the specific people involved. we have a duty as podcasters and influencers to our audience to provide moral clarity on the big issues of the day. And so to say, well, just talk about the issues, don't talk about the people. The people and the issues are sort of becoming quite similar. So I think it's a very tricky thing to navigate, but I think you are absolutely 100% right that the way we talk about it should always try to be in the constructive sense and always try to invite, I think, what's the word? Diffusing the tension and just trying to get out some sanity, hopefully some common ground, and just kind of always speak in the intellectual sense. There is also a bit of a tendency to want to create a bit of drama on both sides for clicks and views,
Right.
and so it's tricky because in some ways that gets the message out more, and it's just a bit of a tricky cycle.
Right, but in reality, what I say is there was a way for him to kind of get, like, you'd even try, if you're friends with Megyn Kelly, right? Try to be persuasive, right? Talk to her, say, can we have a meeting? Can we sit down? How do we define it right way? I mean, she has every right to criticize. Listen, the government of Israel, if we actually take Judaism, right? I'm going to make something crazy right now with this podcast, right? If we actually take Judaism, the government of Israel is not necessarily what Judeo beliefs are, right? Judaism believes in a monarchy. Judaism does not believe in a governmental democratic system.
What? Yeah, it's not perfect. It's certainly not. It's certainly
okay,
not Jewish in every respect. It's also not Jewish in every respect.
Okay, so as any government, we are allowed to criticize, right? I criticize the Israeli government many times. Like, give an example. I'm an American citizen, but I'm also an Israeli citizen. But when I leave Israel, they force me to have an Israeli passport. Mm-hmm. So one time I came in, I didn't know. It was within 6 months of my passport. And I'm leaving. And I'm like, and I go to the consulate. I'm like, okay, I got to go. She's like, no, you're not allowed to leave. I'm like, I have a whole life in America. I mean, like, and I told her straight up, if you're not going to give me this exemption letter, I'm going to go to the American Council and I'm going to make a big deal here. Because how am I supposed to know the rules of Israel? I'm living in America my whole life. 90%, 98% of my life. You expect me to know these rules? There's no way for me to know these rules. Okay, next time around, I know. So next time I did it, I'll make sure all my passports are ready to go, But the point I'm trying to say is, that kind of system is a ridiculous system. And also don't forget the court system, where in the whole Supreme Court of Israel, it's all family members and it's a whole mafia over there. And all the liberal Israelis are promoting. Listen, there's a lot to criticize. You should be able to criticize those issues. No doubt in my mind. Now, at the same time, Ben could have actually spoken to Megyn Kelly. If she's your friend, try to talk to her, explain it to her. But then you don't need necessarily to go and attack them in AmFest. AmFest should have been about Charlie Kirk, in my opinion. Honestly, if you read his recent book, this man is a genius. He's a scholar. I never read a person. What he wrote is unbelievable. Like, it's unbelievable. In his latest book, I'm doing another pod like tomorrow night just about his book. Like, his book is it's a book that is needed for the world. It's needed for Jews and Gentiles and all cultures, creeds alike. They all need to read this book. Not only does he talk about the concept of rest and Shabbat and all the stuff, he actually presents a new method of living for the secular world. Like, I haven't seen a person bring forth the importance of Shabbat in the other side of the aisle like he has done. Think about it. I mean, you have to read the book to really identify it. It's an unbelievable book, what he did.
Listen, I definitely hear you. I definitely think we always should try to take the higher ground, always try to focus on the ideas. At the same time, these are one of the big elephants in the room, all these issues, Candace Owens, everything she's saying. You talk about honoring Charlie Kirk. Candace and to some extent Tucker, who was validating, and Megyn, who were validating Candace to some extent, they were deeply dishonoring Charlie Kirk's legacy by all these theories about Turning Point and Erica Kirk being involved and Israel being involved and all of that. And so I do think that Ben Shapiro was actually in some ways honoring him he said, look, he could say, look, I'm just going to take the high ground. I'm just going to talk about Charlie's views and beliefs. On the other hand, you do have these other people speaking up who are doing these deeply damaging stuff. And he's thinking, maybe I really need to give moral clarity to the audience who are listening. So I really feel, I don't think either of us are wrong here on this, but I feel both sides quite strongly. As for Megyn, Ben on stage with her, 6 weeks ago, tried to talk about all the problems with Candace and others, and tried to explain it in a very friendly way and calm way to her. The very next day, she, not Ben, publicly said, Ben lied to me when he said that Candace is insinuating Erica Kirk is involved. He's been dishonest there. She said that without Ben being there.
Right, but then he could have. But then he could have. He has a podcast. He has his whole system, his whole apparatus of his whole media company. He could have then done a podcast with a short 2 minutes, 3 minutes, taking the section of where Candace said it, bringing the section of Megyn, and say, Megyn, what's going on here?
Well, he did the exact same thing, but it just happened to be in his speech. He said, Megyn is a friend of mine.
He did. You know what the problem is? Think about what the problem is here. This is my deduction of really the problem. Sure. Ben Shapiro is a lawyer. Candace Owens is a lawyer. Megyn Kelly is a lawyer. Their whole life is about flipping words and playing around with words. That's their whole life. That's their whole career, right? That's the way I see it. And what we're doing is we're getting involved as podcasters, as real, genuine people, and we're getting involved with a lawyer battle, like attorney battle. They think that our audience or the audiences that are out there, as if they're the court, they're the courts, and they will determine. That's why Candace always says, "I'm just asking the questions," like you would ask the questions in a deposition. She's basically making a whole podcast a deposition, straight up.
And Ben Shapiro's, I think, trying to provide the moral clarity and saying you're not just asking questions, you're actually just having dead end.
Yeah. No doubt. I agree with him on that point. I agree with you on that. Yeah, for sure. She's a nut job. She's lost her mind.
I'm just, because this idea of, I'm not convinced in the case of Candace, Tucker, and now Megyn, unfortunately as well, that they are acting in good faith. And the problem with that is once they're no longer acting in good faith, it becomes very hard to try and have reasonable, rational conversations, even off camera. And so the only question that presents you at that point is, do I provide moral clarity explicitly to the people that are all being affected by this when I have a big platform to do so? Now, the downside is it can be seen as divisive. It might even make some people dig their heels in even more. On the other hand, it might give people moral clarity. I am of the view one should always try to diffuse the personal tension as much as possible. But if you have wayward or rebellious children, the answer is not just to placate them and say, no, you're great, you're fine, or we just need to have.
Yeah, but that's condescending when you say, not you per se. I know Ben Shapiro said that, but when you use those terminologies for Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson, and Megyn Kelly said the same thing. It's condescending. You can't say those kind of things like you're saying, oh, we're all children because we're not acting in the way you're requiring us to act. I mean, that's
so listen, I would agree with you that we should keep trying to move the conversation back towards ideas, back towards positivity. I can agree with you there, but I just think it's a mistake to think that we can try and act in good faith with people who I don't think are acting in good faith anymore.
Yeah, but the reality is attacking someone doesn't help anyone. We need to gain as Jewish people the trust of the.
Listen, you said to me you think there are some Jewish podcasts and people out there who don't think always getting the right message across. I think you were saying that near the start, and so the question is it a good idea or not to say, hey, if you've got someone with a massive platform and they're saying a really negative message, to say, 1 second, this idea is not good. I'm not attacking the person. I'm saying this idea here is really not good to. So it's just.
So I can tell you what the reality is, and this I'll call out this person, no doubt, because he's created a lot of nonsense in the community. Rabbi Shmuley, right? He's a great example where he messed everything up for us, right? Because the way he attacked Candace Owens was beneath the rabbinical. He's, in my mind, he's not considered a rabbi. Because from what it says in Wikipedia, and I'm quoting Wikipedia, it says that they took away his ordination, they took away his smicha. But in reality is he cannot represent our community. There's no way. And the fact that he's always online and he's always in everywhere, in Piers Morgan and so on and so forth, that I think he has done a disservice for our community, especially the way he attacked Candace Owens. It didn't help us. It didn't help us at all.
for example, one of his views around like eroticism being the way and sex toys being the way in which you heal a broken marriage. I spoke about this with one of my rabbis on JTV, Rabbi Manis Friedman, and he very much said, I very much disagree with that. That I think it's actually the intimacy of it. We should try and get rid of things actually that are, and just make it more the intimacy. That's one of the problems right now with intimacy, that we're making it too much about what we get and just the physical pleasure, and that's nice and important. But actually, the focus needs to be more on just the giving and the just falling into each other's into another and the relationship with one another. And it was very much critical of these ideas. And I asked him afterwards, I said, is it potentially problematic that one is criticizing another Jew? And he said, if you're a public figure and you go out and say something publicly, that becomes fair game. And in some ways it becomes an important thing for you to address because it's part of the public conversation and public receipt of information.
No doubt. I mean, the reality is, listen, in my opinion, once you're in the public spectrum and you're throwing out Jewish and Judaica ideology, right? Me as a rabbi, I'm going to come and correct it. I will disagree, and I will bring my sources, right? Like that's who I am. I mean, anyone does any research about me, I bring in sources. We as a rabbinical dayan, a rabbinical judge, it's very complex. It's a lot of work behind it when you're doing a statement or a responsa. There's a lot of work behind it. And the reality is he does not represent, especially what he did in Purim with the nonsense that he did in Purim, and he did the whole thing last year. It was really bad. It did not look good in the public arena. I mean, you got to understand, everything is about perception, right? And people don't get perception is about how people are going to perceive you. They don't understand what Purim is. What do the rest of the world understand what Purim is? That you're dressing up as whatever it is, and that's the custom. Which even then, if you look in halachic commentators, right, it's not necessarily the custom to do all that. Like not everybody says you're allowed to dress up for Purim, and especially a man dressing up whatever he's dressing up. And then you're going to attack Candace Owens with that. For what? I mean, you just made, in many ways, a chilul Hashem, a disgrace for our community than actually helping our community. And I think that's what's happening. And then in the other side, you have a Ben Shapiro. Listen, he's a leader, no doubt. He's one of the top leaders in the Jewish community. I mean, he had, God has given him a blessing, but he needs more, I think, education when it comes to rabbinics and Judaica ideologies and concepts. Philosophy is a tricky word because a lot of people are applying philosophy to reality, and that's not the reality. You can't philosophize your way out of ideas or out of problems or out of reality. There's a reality, and the reality is if you're gonna punch someone, you better expect them punching you back. That's just reality, right? And I think as a Jewish community, we gotta focus on the beauty about Judaism, present it to the public. I see you do that a lot, by the way. Your podcasts are unbelievable, by the way. I commend you. That's why I wanted you on our show here today. I want to present to the grassroots people that I know, which they will watch my podcast for sure and later on throughout the week. But I think that's essentially my position, right? And I hear what you're saying also. I agree with a lot what you're saying. I think every case scenario has to be decided separately, in my opinion. Like every case has to be decided. But I think you should not make that decision alone. Like if let's say I had a situation, I will call you now because I have contact. I'll text you. What should I do here? What do you think? Like before I do it. These are the things I love to do. I love to collaborate solutions and see, okay, he says A, he says B. Okay, I'm gonna mix it up a little bit, because they're both right. Now it gives me a click. Okay, let's do this now. And I do this in my business ventures, my rabbinical ventures, and now I'm gonna do the same thing with my podcasting ventures. I would ask people. I think what's happening with Ben Shapiro, he's in an echo chamber of himself, and he's not asking other podcasters and other Jewish people that are in the space of podcasting and media, what will it look like if you say or you do X, Y, and Z? That's my opinion. That's what I think.
Don't know. I mean, he really held back on saying a lot of naming names as we're.
All right. I mean, that doesn't mean
a long time. No,
but I think justify it, right?
It doesn't justify, but I would venture to guess, just to guess, that he probably has consulted quite a lot of people because he knows that this is very tricky territory that could have high stakes on his career. But who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, no doubt. All right, moving on. What do you think about Venezuela and what's going on? Because this is the biggest thing right now. And I think Adam Sosnick and Patrick or David said this, and it's all over social media, how the liberals were no kings. And then all of a sudden, they're upset that the king was taken down.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on there? What's your take on that? Where does that come from? Where does that, I cannot understand that.
Well, I think what we've basically seen since October 7th, there's been two major things happening. One is the battle between Judaism and the Judeo-Christian world versus Islam is becoming very real and physical.
Right.
And it's kind of reaching its culmination, which is very messianic in nature. The other element that we're seeing is the collapse of Western morality and Western idols. So we saw complete failure of moral sense from the elites, whether it's academia, NGOs, governments, celebrity culture, sports culture, when it came to Israel, Hamas, right? Totally clueless there, international law, all that kind of stuff. And we're realizing that actually there's a real vacuum of moral leadership, and that's obviously going to be where the Jewish people come in. So that's one element to this. And so how does that relate to Venezuela? Well, because here's a guy who has been deposed. He was an evil authoritarian leader who has all these kinds of political and economic relationships with the worst anti-Western state actors. And people say, well, if America could do this, then why can't Russia and China do this? Isn't it going to set a dangerous precedent? Quite the opposite. America, these anti-Western countries are going to be more intimidated by America as a result. And the difference is why it's appropriate for, let's say, America to do this with Venezuela and China to do it with Taiwan is because there's such a thing as good and evil. And the United States of America is based on morality and trying to uphold a world order that promotes that. And they know that if America shrinks, then the Torah values that in many ways America is based on is going to shrink, and they have a duty to protect that. And one of those things is we spoke about concentric circles earlier. In quite a close concentric circle for America is Venezuela. It's the Western Hemisphere, and so you have that factor, which of course leftists and people on the woke side would never admit that there's anything morally better about America than other countries. And then you have the fact that Maduro was deeply evil leader, and you have all these Venezuelans celebrating. So you've got all of that, and then what do the woke progressive side say? They say, by the way, is my camera slightly dodgy your end, or is it all okay? No,
in my end, you're good.
You're not picking up a delay. Okay, great.
No, I'm not picking that.
So you have the woke progressives saying, well, this is against international law, and international law says it's wrong. And this is again what I'm saying, one of those Western idols that has shown itself to be fundamentally lacking, morally lacking. International law. It has the idea of the rule of law in the international arena, certainly has its place, but it's not the end final discussion on morality, certainly from a Jewish perspective. We've been saying this for a while as it pertains to Israel and her wars against all her foes. But now we're seeing that international law is either silent, or in some ways, possibly, they might be able to make a case it's not right for America to do this, but it's clearly not moral. And so the fact that they are basically, what we're seeing is how international law and the wokies who are championing it, they have basically, first of all, I'm not clear that it is against international law, but let's just say the people that try to weaponize it and say you can't do it, their basic moral notion is that, as the Gemara warns, being cruel to the kind to the cruel. And that is their whole approach, that they've confused kindness with passivity and indifference. And so they apply that to Israel as well. Oh, Israel's escalating right now. Well, escalation can actually be a de-escalation, because you're stopping someone who's trying to kill you from killing you, and you're stopping these security threats. And so the whole moral worldview is being exposed right now. And I don't know about you, but I'm finding that it's becoming clearer and clearer, and hopefully dawning on more and more people.
No doubt. No, I agree with you on that point for sure. But I think what's happening also is America has every right to secure its hemisphere. That's not a question. Especially when China, Russia, Iran have been actively involved in courting Venezuela for their benefits and their agendas. Right? I mean
Yeah,
so what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? That's the term. Like
yeah,
if you can do it, why can't we do it, right?
yeah.
So what's the difference? I think America has every right to do it. I personally don't believe in international law. I think international law is a joke. We're not in a globalistic government, and this agenda with the UN and international law is ridiculous. It was ridiculous when it was applied for Netanyahu. I think that was nonsensical, and I think it's ridiculous in general. International law, let's forget. Now, U.S. law, if you have I believe if you have in U.S. law, if you have a rule that you can indict a person for bringing in drugs and selling drugs into America, yeah, go for it. You're not exempt from U.S. law if you're creating improper activity in the land of the U.S. or in
Mhm.
any state. I
Absolutely.
personally believe in that, no doubt. So I think they're in the legal action of it. They're fully legitimate in what they're doing. What I'm concerned about, and this is my biggest concern, is the stability of Venezuela. I think that's going to be the biggest conflict and the biggest situation, right? And I think there's more to it than that. I think what people are not used to in America, and this is from working with civics a lot, in the knowing about civics in the United States, the reality is most agencies in the American government are not proactive. They're actually reactive.
Mm.
This is the first time that you see in a global scale an American agency, which is the U.S. government led by Donald Trump, right? The U.S., not state governments, right? Where they are being proactive in taking down Venezuela. So not only did he, and Joe Rogan actually presented this, I believe, the stats of the suicide overdose rate has seriously dropped since they've been taking this directly.
Mm.
So in their hands, being proactive. So they like the overdose rate has completely like staggeringly dropped. And in reality, what's happening is this proactiveness about Venezuela is actually good for America, and it's good for the Venezuelans because the joke is all these liberals outside. And one guy showed in Instagram, he's like, how do they have all these signs already ready to go for these protests? It just happened the day
I know.
before, and it was
I know.
a January 1st weekend. How did they have these
I
signs
know.
ready to go? And they're all equal in standard. Like it's not
I
like you
know.
went at home and you make these different type of signs and they look very odd from one another. They're systematically created and
Yeah.
printed and set to go. So they're never gonna like it. And the biggest joke is the Venezuelans are happy and we Americans in America are sad. I
I
mean,
know.
these liberals
I
are
know.
sad. It's ridiculous.
I'm not convinced that the whole regime change argument applies here in the same way that you could do it with an Islamic country. Because I just think the culture is radically different. It's much more similar. They're Christian. They're much more similar to the West. The values, the issues, the idea of having lots of civilians who are going to end up becoming suicide bombers and all these things. It's just not. It's a totally different story here. And so the whole calculation around regime change is very, very different.
No doubt. I agree with you 100%. There is no real regime change here.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I think the one who won the Peace Prize, what did she say? She said there is already a regime change. In what sense? That there was an election that was done, and he refused to adhere to that election.
Exactly.
So yeah,
So the worry of, well, they'll democratically elect another terrible government, that they just need to have a functioning rule of law.
right. Or functioning people. They have to
Yeah.
have functioning people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, this has been a great conversation. I
Yeah. Thank you
appreciate
so
this
much.
this thing. We got to do this again. If you don't mind. Maybe in the near future, in a couple of weeks from now. But yeah, very insightful what you said today. I agree with a lot of what you said. Like 99% almost, right? Like just a
Oh, that's good.
few points. Yeah, no, I agree with what you said. You listen, it's very intelligent what you're saying. And can you imagine if you and I bless you that you continue doing what you're doing, because what you're doing is really bringing simple, calm, intelligent ideology and ideas to people that they can maybe start thinking better. And it's very important. I always tell this to people, and I do messaging and marketing for a living. If you talk to people like a lawyer, you will lose them. You will lose them.
That was why I was so drawn by people like Glenn Beck and Dennis Prager, was because it
Yes.
wasn't just that they were giving across ideas, but they were able to capture people's hearts. They were able to be emotive. And that for me is, I think that skill is such a valuable one.
That's a valuable that you, when you're talking, your emotions also resonate to the person watching you.
Yeah.
It's very important. And sometimes I feel some of them are not Candace, not Tucker. They're emotionless. You know, they don't be emotional. You know,
you
got, don't be, anyway, that's for another discussion. We definitely got to discuss that concept as well. How do we deliver our message as a Jewish community to the public back and actually gain their trust back? I think that's very important. Anyway, everybody, thank you for watching us, and keep on watching us.